Hey, power people. Welcome to Renewable Rides, powered by VECKTA. I'm Gareth Evans, the CEO and founder.
And I'm Dan Roberts, head of sales. In each episode, we'll uncover the latest trends, learnings, challenges, and triumphs relating to the energy transition, on-site energy, and sustainability through the experiences of our inspiring guests and team here at VECKTA.
So get ready for an exhilarating adventure into the fast-paced world of challenging limits, adapting purposefully, and empowering co-creation to accelerate the energy transition with those that are on a mission to create a more resilient, profitable, sustainable, and thriving energy future. So let's go. Renewable Rides, episode 36. Dan, can you believe that we've been at this for 8 months and recorded 35 episodes? It's absolutely flown by and had a blast.
Yeah, I've as we've been preparing for this episode, I've been reflecting a bit, and I think back vividly to the call that I received from you on, hey Dan, what are your thoughts on co-hosting a podcast together? And despite the fact that I jumped right in and said absolutely, let's do it, and then thought back like, oh wow, there's probably a lot that goes into this, and I'm going to be putting myself out there. I think we've learned a ton. I've enjoyed it. We've got to interview some incredible people. We've got to take feedback from listeners, feedback from customers, and build those into episodes. And I think it's just really highlighted the importance of education and showing people that have been deploying systems, that do deploy systems, and getting people more comfortable. I think you use the term a lot, building community. And I think when everybody is moving arguably into the unknown, the important thing is to build community and share stories and learn from others' mistakes or learn from the things that went well. I think that's a really important thing that we're trying to accomplish here, and hopefully we've started to do that, and we're only going to get better with time. What are some of your reflections, Gareth?
Yeah, it's been a wild ride. I've really enjoyed it. I think it was one of those, wasn't it, where we were thinking about doing this for many months, and I think this is a prime example of you have to just act and do versus, putting yourself on the spot and continually thinking and dwelling and delaying, committing to making the decision. I think there's so many parallels of that with the energy transition. Like, it feels like a good idea, it's going to have positive outcomes, but there's that kind of imposter syndrome, there's that doubt, there's that lack of what's the process, where do we start, who do we turn to? And I think you hit the nail on the head. I think the biggest learning from this season has been education and awareness is still priority number one. How do we continue to ensure business leaders around the world and people, like we just had a conversation with my dad, people who are interested in this space actually get the education and the awareness they need and the insight to act with confidence. And so episode 36 is rounding out season 1. For all our listeners, we're going to take a quick pause, and then in a few weeks, we'll get back on track with season 2. It'll have a new look, a new feel, and we're committed to providing you all with the insights and the positive stories and the lessons learned to continue to navigate the energy transition. So with that, we're going to summarize season 1, and the best way to do that is to use a podcast episode and a blog that we used at the back end of 2023 to make some predictions for 2024. And I think, Dan, we should probably touch back on this every 6 months or so to see how we're tracking it against those predictions. But our first one was 2024 is going to be a breakout year for distributed energy and on-site energy, and it's going to really help unlock the industry. And it was super exciting to kick off season 1 with empowering change, disrupting the global energy industry, episode 2 with Bill Newsey. And I think he hit the nail on the head that the energy industry is one of the most regulated industries in the world. And with that comes a lot of rules, a lot of status quo thinking, but also tough times force us to challenge that status quo. And I think, Dan, we're really seeing distributed energy getting a lot more attention, aren't we?
Certainly. The other 2 episodes that I think were prior to our 2024 predictions, which was episode 21. We early in this season, follow a couple weeks after that interview with Bill, we hit on episode 6, navigating the onsite energy revolution, and episode 10, demystifying solar energy, separating fact from fiction. Talking a little bit about what an on-site energy system is, the combination of various technologies and some of the value and benefits. And then in demystifying solar, hitting on the fact that while solar is often a part of the mix, solar alone is not often the answer, whether it be trying to drive down costs or decarbonize or even on the resilient side of things, or especially on the resilient side of things. I think one of the things that we've seen play out in the early parts of 2024 here on this being a breakout year for distributed energy is just the massive expectations on load growth, the increasing costs, and the fact that on-site energy is now shifting from a sustainability conversation, which it historically has been primarily, and into operations, finance, senior executive leadership, and even boardrooms because of the concerns around supply and the concerns around cost. So I think we are seeing an inflection point this year due to those factors, and it becoming more of a broad business discussion and not just one around the sustainability side of things. Any additional thoughts here on 2024 being a breakout year?
Yeah, I think Howard in episode 30, simplifying how we think about the energy transition, really hit the nail on the head when he said, the more we can electrify our businesses on the demand side, the more we can create the vehicle for using renewable energy directly. And he said this should be self-evident to people. There's huge efficiency gains. And I think this is part of what we're doing is it probably isn't self-evident to a lot of people. So if we're electrifying our facilities, if we're automating more processes, we're electrifying our fleets, that requires more energy. But if we can consume it right where we generate and store it, that is on-site energy in a nutshell. Let's generate renewable energy or have hybrid systems that may be a combination of traditional power, gas, and diesel, as well as renewables. And let's use that energy right where it's needed at its source. And we actually then create profitable and sustainable outcomes, which I think is absolutely incredible. And more business leaders are realizing the opportunity around that, which perfectly leads us into, we predicted also that the leading businesses in the world would grow through economic smarts, and that 2024 was going to be quite a challenging year economically, with elections coming up, interest rates remaining high. Those have both played out, and the energy costs make up to 40% of businesses' operating costs. And we're seeing great news stories, aren't we, Dan, around leading businesses using on-site energy to actually make a hugely positive impact.
Yeah, I think the most shining example so far is episode 31, which was titled "Learnings from Walmart's Phenomenal Emission Reduction Journey." They are certainly, if not the leader, one of the primary leaders in deploying these systems. They had set about reducing a gigawatt of emissions in their Project Gigaton program, and they achieved that goal 6 years early. And I don't think that was by accident. I think that was by really finding great business cases, both within their own business, but then also driving their suppliers. You had hit on a point there during that episode of, quote, "The best businesses in the world will be the ones initiating action on emissions instead of getting pushed by buyers. As a result, they're going to attract and retain the best contracts in the world by being the most sustainable and most reliable and the most profitable business they can possibly be." And I think that's a critical point of looking at profitability in conjunction with emissions or sustainability, and not one versus the other. Any thoughts there?
Yeah, no, absolutely spot on. And I think for those that weren't tracking that, Walmart achieved this by actually deploying on-site energy at over 600 of their facilities around the world. And you highlighted the fact that they were able to reduce their Scope 2 emissions to help achieve their internal targets, but while doing so, lower their operating costs and increase their operational resilience, which is, we talked about the graph that shows their emissions coming down and their actual revenues and profits increasing which really challenges the other myth in the industry that sustainability has to come at the expense of profitability. So I think an amazing case study. And I think then we went on to episode 4, talking about empowering tomorrow, understanding the global impact of the energy transition. And you'd mentioned the more efficient, the more flexible, and the more resilient we make these systems, the more successful we'll all be. And it's very hard to move the needle on the energy transition with these big central power generation facilities. We have to invest billions of dollars into central infrastructure that has many single points of failure. And more businesses are realizing that actually by decentralizing these assets, generating the energy where they need it, they have more control over their cost certainty, also their energy reliability. And we're seeing that consistently, more and more outages across the country. Any other reflections, Dan?
Yeah, I think the highlighting the point on growth through economic smarts, taking control and businesses really feeling empowered to take control and have a bit of energy sovereignty, I think is part of that. A staggering figure that I saw the other day was of all the utility scale power generation projects, fossil fuel, renewable or otherwise, that have gone to permitting over the last 20 years, only 21% have actually come online. And so that shows the kind of the logjam, if you will, of these projects. So rather than relying on the utilities to bring these projects online, businesses can adopt them themselves and really take their destiny into their own hands. And so I think that's a critical part. I mean, we hit on in episode 5, revolutionizing renewable energy with Owen Quinn. He said that although we hear that things are not moving fast enough in the renewable energy space, things are happening and they will continue to happen, but it takes time. And that a lot of his experiences on the utility scale projects. And I think, but it takes time component is something that a lot of businesses don't have time to wait, especially as they're looking to scale their operations. They're looking to grow. They're looking to electrify. So I think it's important for companies to take matters into their own hands. And one shining example of a company that has is Firestone Brewing. So in episode 7, we interviewed Nick Firestone of Firestone Brewing here in California. And solar has been, as stated by Nick, solar has been a really great project for us. And by the end of the year, we'll probably be 100% covered by their solar arrays because they're expanding it. And for them, it's not, sustainability isn't just a logo or a portion of their packaging and logo. It's a long-term business strategy to maintain their business health. And I think that's really admirable. It was interesting when I was on site there at Firestone, they're taking it beyond just production, but as a beer producer, they consume a ton of CO2 in making their beer to put it into the cans and bottles in kegs. And their processes, their boilers produce CO2 from burning natural gas and fossil fuels. So they were actually in the process of implementing a CO2 recapture system to scrub it and then actually make it food grade and put it back into the food, which I think is awesome. And again, really fulfills that ethos of sustainability there. So I love to see an example of that, of them taking it into their own hands.
Yeah, exactly. And Steve said in episode 28, Steve Pullins, why microgrids? He said there's literally like gigawatts worth of opportunity for customers, in terms of these on-site energy systems. And he's absolutely spot on. I think we've touched on a few examples, but literally every business has at least one, but often many facilities where they should be doing this because it is extremely cost beneficial. And we ended up having to record an episode on demystifying your energy bill at episode 12 because we've realized most businesses just have their bills on auto pay and they don't necessarily even know how to read them. Like, what is a demand charge? What are on-peak and off-peak rates? I think it's critical that businesses actually start taking a close look at their energy costs because I think they'll be blown away by how much they consistently go up and how they will continue to go up, but in a very unpredictable way. And it's very hard for us to run our businesses when one of the biggest cost inputs, maybe going up 3% this year, 20% next year, 50% the year after that, and actually understanding how we can manage that and navigate that challenge is going to be super interesting going forwards.
Yeah, we've been using the term in conversations, and it's very much resonating with business leaders of trapped value. How these businesses have massive amounts. We're talking in the millions, tens of millions, in some cases, hundreds of millions of dollars of trapped value within their business, where they have pathways to reduce their operating costs, but they just simply haven't been unlocking that value due to the challenges historically of deploying these systems. So I think that's the exciting thing when we talk about growth through economic sparks. It's unlocking this trapped value that's inherently within businesses, and I think we'll see more of that in the coming years.
Yeah, absolutely. So our third prediction, Dan, was we said there'll be a gas pedal on EV deployments and electrification. I think we've touched on the electrification enough, but in terms of EV deployments, we said EVs are no longer a niche market with improved battery technologies, increased ranges, a more diverse model to choose from for a broader audience. The sort of risk associated with buying an EV is being demystified. But we've seen some mixed messages in the market, haven't we? And I think this one isn't necessarily a slam dunk prediction. I think it's the trend is definitely in the right direction, but maybe not as quick as what people had hoped. And in episode 25, we touched on Hertz's story. Do you want to shed some light on that?
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest examples of our prediction not necessarily playing out as we had necessarily anticipated. And I mean, this is really, again, episode 25 called Charging Ahead or Stalling Out. Really, some of those quotes we had in the year here was that 2024 is set to be the year of more EVs, more charging infrastructure, more vehicle models, and more interest in adopting them. But then we see Hertz pulling back and reducing their EV fleet. In fact, selling off 20,000 vehicles. And I think, unfortunately, the backlash from that, since recording that episode on Hertz, CEO Steve Scheer is stepping down from his role as a member of the team and on the board of directors as of March 31st. And they've announced that Gil West, the former COO of Delta Airlines, and GM's Cruise, the autonomous driving unit, will be stepping in as the Hertz CEO starting, well, as of a couple of days ago on April 1st. And so we'll see how Gil takes this and either flips the script again and really leans into EVs or continues with this pullback. But yeah, I was a bit shocked by that. Others, I would say, we've seen others that have come out and really planted the flag to say that we're here to stay. I think we've seen recently the Stellantis CEO really saying that we're not pulling back. We're leaning in even further into EVs, and I think that's really admirable. I think it's they're when we play this out over the next 10 plus years, I would anticipate seeing Stellantis rise in the ranks because of that decision of moving ahead with the future rather than kind of resting on their laurels of what's worked over the past many decades. Yeah. How did that impact you as you were thinking through that?
Yeah, I think the biggest takeaway for me on the EV side is that the vehicles exist now, and I think it's an infrastructure play to support that. And I think we're seeing, working firsthand with some of the biggest automakers in the world, how can they continue to meet their emission reduction targets while also deploying more EV charging infrastructure, which is going to increase their energy consumption? Like, they're two contrasting needs, and how do you deliver that in a really efficient, scalable, repeatable way? And I think that's the real opportunity for the businesses that are going to win in this space, is being able to do that at scale. And I think Corey really hit the nail on the head for me with episode 34, the real reasons EV adoption isn't higher. He said right now the major challenge isn't with EVs, it's more related to perception, emotion, and politics. And it's more of a when this will happen versus if it will happen. And I think he's absolutely spot on. We need to provide the infrastructure to make people feel more comfortable, feel more emotionally connected with replacing their vehicle. And I think the political story will go away, because I think we're going to see more jobs created, more cost-efficient solutions, more autonomy, and more distributed access, which I think really appeals to both sides ultimately.
Yeah, funny. Since launching that interview with Corey, for those that have followed him, they'll have seen this. Others take a look at it. He's just documented a family road trip towing an Airstream trailer with a Ford Lightning, and some of the challenges he's run into and fun things that he's learned. And so I'd encourage people to take a look at that. I think you're right. Infrastructure is the critical piece into seeing our prediction come to life. And I mean, prime example, we're just kicking off some work right now with a fleet owner that simply cannot charge all of their electric fleet due to constraints from their utility. They cannot get enough service for enough power from their utility to charge those vehicles, and the utility is telling them they're going to need to spend somewhere between $500,000 and $1 million in upgrading the utility infrastructure to get that power. And they're saying, hold on a minute, I don't need to pay for your infrastructure utility. Why don't I just build something myself that I can rely on, that I can have as an asset? And that's really what we're helping them go on that journey. So that's a case of not just the charging station infrastructure or like the chargers, but the actual grid infrastructure supporting them and their EV fleet. So I think that's going to continue to be one of the challenges we see the load growth.
Yeah, absolutely. So that leads us on to our next two predictions, Dan, which were energy security and sovereignty is going to be a real topic of conversation, and the aging equipment from the centralized infrastructure that we've come to rely on is going to be kind of at the center of that. I think you touched on this before in terms of the electrical load growth. Our current grid and our utilities can't even deal with our energy demands today. We're seeing power outages increasing in frequency and severity across the country and across the world, because the infrastructure is in some cases up to 100 years old, and it's struggling to meet our current demands. And so as we start loading more and more expectations onto the grid, it's going to continue to be challenged. And I think one of the big lessons for us coming out of this is we're seeing more and more businesses approach us who are looking to build greenfield facilities and realizing that they can't just go and build a new manufacturing facility or a new data center wherever they want to, because most utilities do not have any spare energy capacity to give them. And they're telling them they've got to wait between 3 and 10 years to get access to the energy they want. And so I think this is going to become an ongoing topic of conversation. I think we're pretty spot on with this prediction. I think it's only going to get worse before it gets better. What are your reflections on this one?
Yeah, I'm just reflecting on a conversation we had with a trucking company yesterday that said they're working on electrifying a portion of their fleet in a very specific Southern California portion of their operations, and they need roughly 20 megawatts to support this charging facility, and they can only get 1 megawatt of service. So 5% of what they need, they can get from the utility. That's a big challenge for them as a business. And I think that holds true when we look more broadly. I recently came across, not recently came across, a report was published just 2 days ago on April 8th that from the EFI Foundation, which is a nonprofit organization that's focused on the energy transition. And their report was called Managing Unprecedented Electricity Demand Growth on the Path to Net Zero Emissions. And they found that the pace of electricity load growth could nearly double or even triple over the next 5 years. So, I think that is much greater. In episode 27, we talked about the power grid realities and risks for businesses. And in that, we highlighted a figure of electric load growth is expected to increase 81% more than what grid planners had expected. This new report from EFI is saying double or triple what was expected. And I think we're seeing that both through transportation electrification, but arguably more so right now is the explosion of AI. And the only thing that supports the explosion of AI is data centers. And that is arguably the biggest power suck, or the biggest growth of power suck in our country. And it's impacting businesses all around, and utilities are scrambling to figure out how they facilitate it. I think back to a conversation we had with a big utility saying that their applications for service is equal to that of the entire capacity of their grid today, which is pretty mind-blowing.
Yeah.
So I think energy sovereignty is going to continue to be something that is impacting, that's stifling growth in some cases, let alone impacting people's ability to continue to operate.
Yeah. Yeah, we were recently at Qualcomm together, and we got an opportunity to tour their museum. And I think what was really interesting for us was, the countries and the communities and the cities that have advanced the most in 20 years were those that got access to high-speed internets and good connections and 4G, then 5G. And Qualcomm was at the center of all that. And I think there's a lot of parallels between the transition from dial-up telephones and telephone lines to today being able to operate completely, remotely on our iPhones and Samsung Galaxies and all that, and seeing how far it's come, and it's been enabled by technology. And I think on the power side, we're still using the dial-up telephones and the telephone lines. And how do we get to using these computers in our pockets? And I think the supply chain challenges are really tough for businesses to navigate. We use the stat that transformers, which are a critical part of power infrastructure, are on average 40 years old. You said this, and yet the life expectancy of them should be 20 to 30 years. And so how do we overcome that? And there's a 2-year backlog if you need to replace these transformers. And we recently saw the BP refinery up in Chicago lose power for several weeks, which would have cost them, I can't imagine, probably hundreds of millions of dollars. And it was a transformer issue. And I imagine it was quite challenging to replace that. And so these are reasons why we see our energy costs going up, because these infrastructure improvements are needed. In episode 14, we talked about grid hardening, gold rush, necessary expense, or financial folly. And this was about PG&E investing in trying to harden their power line infrastructure to prevent wildfires. But as a result, they're spending $30 billion over the coming years. And the only people that pay for that are our businesses, ourselves as ratepayers. And that's just not sustainable.
No. And it's interesting to see them kind of hiding the rate increases in a blended percentage, where they're saying, oh, the rates only went up 13%. However, when our team dug into it, most of the commercial or industrial rates were going up 15, 20. Some of the demand charges even we saw on ag rates going up over 80%. Yeah. And so I think it's only going to continue. So, boy, what I was going to say a year, but what an 8 months it's been. But what a season one it's been, and we really appreciate all the support and questions, and like you said at the beginning, we're really focusing as we move into season 2 on focusing more on those that have deployed systems, answering more of the questions that we continue to receive, demystifying common misconceptions. It's going to be a ton of fun. I think on a personal note, Gareth, what are some of your reflections as we've gone on this journey together of creating a new podcast that's focused on this space?
I love the concept of you don't know what you don't know. And I think we came into this very naively. And I remember that very first podcast recording with Bill Newsey. And we're both sat there with our AirPods in. And he's like, what are you guys doing? Like, this sound quality is going to be garbage. And we were both like, what is he on about? And then we listened to it back and we were like, oh my God, this is terrible. And so, just learnings like that, where we've now got better microphones, we've got better cameras, we've got better recording processes. We make sure that we're in more attractive areas where we're not going to be disturbed, and it's going to be good quality. And so I think just procedurally, huge parallels to what we've learned just doing a podcast. and what our customers are learning in terms of how to navigate the energy transition. And I think also just, I think getting more comfortable having these freestyle conversations and not making them scripted, making them more fun and engaging. And I think the feedback's been great. And I think what surprised us the most was people wanted to learn more about ourselves and VECKTA and what we're actually personally seeing in the market. So we need to be bringing more and more of that to season 2. And my final comment would be, in terms of our predictions, a real fun one for me was I should have invested more in crypto. Our personal prediction was crypto is going to take off in 2024. And certainly so far, its momentum has been ridiculous. Ethereum has rallied 85%, Bitcoin 150% since 2023. And as of right now, April, Bitcoin's up another 64.9% year to date, and Ethereum 55.6%. So that's always a fun one for me to track. Another energy load growth demand for our industry. And I think I wish I'd have invested more because I could have used some of those returns.
Should have followed your own predictions.
I know.
Maybe not invest in a bunch of EV stocks, given that prediction's not quite playing out as we anticipated. But you were pretty spot on the on the crypto side of things. I think for me, like you, it's been a journey. I didn't necessarily have a fear of public speaking by any means, but I'd been a guest on a couple podcasts. But the thought of consistently being on record on every week and was a bit daunting, but it's gotten a lot more natural. I think it's also just helped us in how we think. I've learned a ton from our guests. We've had some pretty amazing guests. We've already done a spoiler alert, some recordings for season 2, and we've got some pretty heavy hitters that we're excited to bring to our listeners. I think really when I think back on it, a big part of sales and sales can get a bad connotation sometimes. Really, when I think of sales, it's how do we get people, businesses to a better state than a better future state than where they are today, which is what we do every day on a regular basis. But education is really needed with the people that we're working with, but oftentimes the champions and the stakeholders that we're working with directly, they get it. They need to influence their internal stakeholders. And so that has been a really critical element of everything we've done. And it's been fun taking some of these episodes and creating blog posts and other written content to help those that may not have time to listen to a podcast still learn and consume those. So that's another piece that we're going to continue to focus on as we move into season 2 of the podcast, is making sure that we're highlighting information and insights that are critical to all of the different stakeholders that are important to greenlight these projects and reap the benefits of them. So I'm excited to share more about VECKTA. I'm excited to share more about us personally, but more importantly, I'm excited to dig into many of the topics that continue to come up. And this is an evolving landscape. It is a transition. We're moving into the unknown, but the good news is there's a lot of groundwork that's been laid that we can benefit and learn from and help people navigate this at scale and reap the benefits and unlock all that trapped value. So here's to a hell of a season 1, and excited for what's ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think two final reflections that I really enjoyed from our guests. One was, I know you really appreciated this one. I think this has served us really well in the podcast recording process, was Tony Frencham's windshield bug analogy of, bugs are going to hit your windows. You can't focus on them. You have to just wipe them off and keep going. I love that. And I think that's certainly our attitude towards this, continue to adapt purposefully. So keep the feedback coming. And Brad Andrews, he said, if you want to imprint yourself on the world, the sustainable industry is where to do it. And I think more than ever, we're firm believers in that. And I think more and more people are getting on board every day. And that's what's exciting. Let's build that community. Let's share the success stories and let's get after it. So here's to an awesome season 1. It's been a pleasure doing business with you, and really enjoyed it, Dan. Excited for season 2.
We receive a lot of questions from business leaders around the world wanting to learn more about the energy transition, what is possible, and where to start. So to help you stay informed and up to date on best practices, opportunities, risks, and success stories, we created an industry newsfeed at VECKTA.com/news with all our podcasts, blogs, and newsletter. Check it out and connect with Dan, myself, and the VECKTA team to learn more. Cheers and have a good one.